Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, my brother over on his channel Forgotten Lives has just launched a fantastic video. I really don't want to spoil it, the story is too good. When he was telling me about it, I just had to listen to it. The video is brilliant. I strongly recommend you go watch it after you're done here, if you still have something else to watch. His channel is about people's lives that you probably don't know about, who did really incredible things, whether that be criminal or not. It is a really good channel. I recommend it, especially this story. Just check it out. It is really good. I'll leave the link in the description, and there'll be a plug at the end of the video where you just need to click to go over to the channel. But anyway, for now, it's time to get comfortable, because there's something strange going on in the woods. So let the darkness take control. I've had a series of strange events happen in haunted woods. All of this happened this summer when I was working and living in the Chicago area. I don't know much about spirits or paranormal events, so I'll just give you the facts of what happened, and you can make your own conclusions. In the first few weeks of my new job, I met this really great guy called Paul. We hit it off immediately, and one day he suggested we go hiking in the woods. I'm from Russia originally, so I was practically raised in the woods, and I was really excited about this proposal. As we're hiking, it starts pouring with rain, an amount the likes of which I had never seen. We go deeper and deeper into the forest until there's no more paths and we're practically treading swamp water. All this time, we're just talking about random stuff and getting to know each other while not really paying much attention to the surroundings. There's no one around since we've gone pretty deep in already, and it was pouring buckets. Eventually, we stumble on the skeleton of a teepee, just the bare wooden structure of it, and thought it was pretty cool, so we kept going in that direction. Suddenly, we both hear someone crying. It sounded like a baby, and it's a forest, so lots of animals can imitate that sound, like deer, cubs, and the like. The cry sounded distant, so we thought nothing of it and walked forwards. Within seconds, we heard the thing right next to us, which seemed strange since it sounded so far away at first. It was so loud, it could have been a few feet away, and we started looking all around, even looking at the trees, and absolutely nothing was there. It was a pretty weird situation, so we kind of speed walk in the other direction. As soon as we stop for a break, the sound starts up right next to us again, like something was telling us to book it. So we did. Ran faster than was probably safe in that kind of weather, half looking at Google Maps and half relying on memory. We made it back to the entrance of the woods, and both agreed that what happened was pretty weird, and decided to look into the history of the place. Immediately, websites like Most Haunted Forests in Illinois started popping up. Turns out the place was a site of ancient Native American burial grounds. Not surprised, since a lot of tribes used to live in various parts of Illinois. Paul and I went back, and I've kind of forgot the incident until one evening after work, when he tells me that he can't stop thinking about the cry and wants to go back to see what was there. Naturally, I think it's a stupid idea, especially because it was already dark out, but then Paul's friend Ryan joins him for kicks, and since I'm worried for both of their safety, 20-something fresh out of college dudes can be very dumb, you see, I come along with them, thinking that I can at least keep them out of trouble. So we hop in the car and drive over there. The traffic is insane, and my friend takes a wrong turn, so we don't get there until 11 p.m. We get out, and head into the forest. Now, there's no streetlights anywhere near us except right at the edge of the road, and the flashlights can only do so much, so our visibility is pretty bad. We eventually get to a small wooden bridge that leads us across the river into the actual deep part of the forest, and as soon as we cross, I start feeling uneasy. We weren't supposed to be in the woods that late in the first place, but there was a deeper feeling of guilt, like we were intruding or disturbing something that was there. Ryan, who's been leading the way and feeling all confident and cocky, saying that there's nothing out here, stops all of a sudden. On the other side of the bridge, the three of us were hit with this feeling of dread and panic, one I've never felt in a forest before. And I've been to lots, both in the day and at night. We all exchange nervous looks and suddenly hear crunching coming towards us from the dark. The feeling at this point gets so intense that Ryan, confidently walking ahead seconds ago, now looks uneasy and says, "I think we should go back." We all slowly turn around and start speed walking towards the bridge. No one talks until we get to the other side, and Ryan says, "I was just nervous because it might have been a homeless person and I didn't want to deal with that." Eventually, we get to the road where our car was parked, along the side, and that's when I see a girl, maybe in her early 20s. She looked Native American or a mix of Asian Latino, just walking along the highway. She was wearing very little clothing and looked a little strange. Her walk wasn't a drunken one. She just seemed to be almost vibrating, undulating, but there wasn't a building around for miles. My stepdad is Malaysian, and he's told me a bunch of ghost stories about young ghost women on the sides of the roads that kill drivers, but I was willing to risk it because I didn't want to leave the girl alone, ghost or no ghost. So I convinced Paul to slow down a bit when we get to her, and I called out to her from the passenger window, asking if she needed help. The girl slowly turns around with the creepiest, slowest smile spreading across her lips, and nodded. I was hit with that same feeling I got back there in the forest, and almost regretted slowing down. But whatever. My sense of wanting to help that girl was greater than whatever weird stuff I was feeling. And if I died then, at least I'd have a clean conscience. She gets in the back of the car right behind my seat, and next to Ryan, who is a bit of a flirt, and he starts to chat her up, asking where she's from and what she's doing. All this time I'm turned halfway around, keeping an eye on her because I feel like as soon as I turn around and face the road, something bad is gonna happen. She's making eye contact with me the whole time, even when Ryan is talking to her with that very slow, creepy smile. Ryan asks her where she's coming from, and she says, "Oh, just around." He asks if she's coming from a bar, and she nods, except of course there are no bars around for anywhere. She says that she was walking, and gives Paul an address, which is 15 minutes away by car. My eyes hurt from making eye contact with her, and she just kept smiling and undulating, and this feeling of dread just kept increasing. So we eventually drop her off at her street, and when I turn back to look a second later, she's gone. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept imagining her creeping up the stairs, her smiling face undulating from the shadows. I work in a wildlife rehabilitation center in the middle of a forest, atop a hill about 20 minutes away from the nearest streetlight. It's a beautiful property during the day, but at night, you can hardly see your hand in front of your face unless the moon is high enough over the trees to shed a little bit of light on the area. I started working here last year, usually being put on the closing shift, but we typically were on the property until the wee hours of the morning, since the sheer number of animals in our care prevented us from going home before everything was complete. The facility itself is deeply haunted. I've known that since a few weeks into my employment. One of the routes for the Trail of Tears actually went right through what is now the property, but more of that later. These are some of the stories that I have collected while working here. One night, as we were all wrapping up downstairs and getting ready to shut down for the evening, the doorbell rang. It must have been 10 p.m. by then, and we close admissions by 5 usually, as all of our admissions are by appointment only, but only on occasion we get a walk-in. With a sigh, my co-worker goes upstairs to greet the person and take the animal down for a quick examination. After a few minutes, she comes back down empty-handed and looking a bit unsettled. Upon being asked what the problem was, she answered, "There was no one at the door. There's no other car in the lot." This happened at least 2 to 3 other times. I've always been a little sensitive to the paranormal, but I'm pretty skeptical by nature. I want to first rule out any other possible scenarios before jumping to the conclusion of something otherworldly. So I chalked these situations up to an electrical error. The building took on a whole new energy at night. Rooms of the facility that were well lit and normal during the day felt more ominous at night. I never wanted to be alone inside by myself after 8:30. That's when things got weird. Mostly, it's just the feeling that I'm being watched, or thinking I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's all just very unsettling. As one of our interns was leaving one night, she said she heard someone calling her from the parking lot. "Psst, over here." There was no one there. One night, my co-worker went outside to finish up animal care in some of the outside enclosures that hadn't been done during the day, and I was left alone inside to finish prepping diets for some of the raccoon babies we had inside. We had a microwave above the counter, and I'd long since gotten used to seeing my silhouette in the reflective sheen on the door. I reached up to retrieve the bowl that I would put into the microwave and shut the door once I was done, only to see the reflection of a silhouette behind mine. I whipped around so fast I nearly dropped the bowl. No one was standing behind me, and when I looked back into the reflection, the silhouette wasn't there anymore. As I said previously, the Trail of Tears ran through the property, and at least 2 of my co-workers have made separate comments about seeing a woman in buckskin either walking through the hallway or standing in the laundry room. She always moves out of sight before anyone can try and say something to her. We have a separate little building on the property that's now a storage unit. It once housed interns that would stay on site overnight, but it's been a long time since it's been used for that purpose. I've always gotten a weird feeling whenever I'm near it. I've never been inside, and I hope I'll never have to. Anytime I walk past it, I feel incredibly unsettled, like there's someone standing behind me or watching me. Several months ago, I was informed we no longer have interns living in the building because late one night, a man walked in and stood in the doorway staring at the interns while they were trying to sleep. Since then, we've installed trail cams and security cameras all over the property. There's a million stories I can tell about this place, and maybe one day I will. So far, these are the only true paranormal feeling ones that I have to share. There is an old legend in Virginia of a road in Yorktown called Crawford Road. There are tons of ghost stories about that road. One being an African American lady that hung herself off the bridge, and can still be seen hanging herself off the bridge if you go under and look behind you. There are other stories of soldiers walking down the road, lights in the distance, and cars stalling when you park under the bridge. There are a lot more stories that you can look up on your own, but this is the story of me and my friends' experiences down that road. I was personally not a believer in ghosts, because I never saw one until that night. So to start the day, we were talking about some paranormal experiences. Me and West mentioned that we had never had a paranormal experience before. So West was determined to have one tonight, and wanted to know of a haunted location. I remembered a friend of mine that lived in Yorktown telling me of the legends of Crawford Road, and I brought it up to the group. We checked the time it would take us to get there, and we thought to kill time until it got dark. All the while, we're reading up different stories online to see what we were getting ourselves into. Needless to say, everyone was pretty excited, but we were not prepared for what would happen. Once night hits, we go down the road, and we don't see anything unusual, as many other cars were also going down the road, and there was a cop sitting at the top of the bridge. So, we decided to go get some food while we waited a bit longer for the road to be less congested, and for the cop to leave. An hour later, we go back down the road once we get to the bridge, and there's another group of people on the road, looking to see what they can find. We chat for a bit, and they say that they haven't seen anything. So our group goes up to the top of the bridge to see what we can find. We're all up there, and we don't really see anything besides a strange symbol on the road, and your typical graffiti. We see a car coming, and we didn't want to get caught. So, me, West, and Abel go back down, while Natalie and Jay stay up there and turn their lights off. After less than 2 minutes, Natalie and Jay run down, freaking the hell out, saying they both saw a tall woman dressed in white walk out of the woods into the bridge. Obviously, like idiots, our group walks up to see. We couldn't see her when we went up there, but as we looked down onto the road to see if we could see anything, all of a sudden we hear an angry scream in the distance. We all book it and get the hell out of there, and the other group bail as well as soon as they heard the scream. We start to drive away from the bridge, and being determined to see an actual ghost, all of us had our windows down and were taking constant pictures while driving. Eventually we hear Jay, panicked, tell us to drive faster as he's sticking his head out of the window. Once we get far enough, he says that he saw something on 4 legs running after the car. This was only the start, and we begin to look at the pictures we had taken and watch the video West had been taking the whole time that we were down there. In the video, when we heard the scream and start to run, we could clearly hear a gargled cackle that we did not hear at that moment, and the pictures were even worse. Some of them were of nothing, but a lot of Jay's photos had a mysterious glow in them, and another one of our group's pictures were completely white, whilst the rest were fine. In some of the photos, we could even see a strange blue box in both Jay and Abel's pictures, which was made even worse because they were on opposite sides of the car. And the worst one is when Natalie took a picture of the side view mirror and could clearly see a face with 2 black eyes. We were properly freaked the hell out, but we decided to drive down the road one last time to do the same thing and take pictures on all sides of the car. While going down it, we didn't see anything of interest until at the bridge, when Jay said he saw someone in white waving at the car. But the pictures were a completely different story, as one of the pictures that Natalie got was of the four-legged creature sitting on the top of a broken fence post like it was waiting for us. After that, we decided to get out of there and finally get home. When we get back, we can clearly see a large handprint and a small handprint on the window on Jay's side. We also see a multitude of other handprints on the car, as well as scratch marks, and on the back of the car, the same symbols that were on the top of the bridge. When we got home, I looked into further detail about the stories from others, and found out that the scream was something of a call to the others on the road, which would explain the creature chasing us. But I haven't been able to find a single one about a four-legged creature chasing them. This had to be one of the scariest nights of my life, and we are all planning to visit Crawford Road again to see what else we might find. My husband is from Mississippi, and I'm from California. We met in Los Angeles, and when we first started getting serious about 8 years ago, he decided he wanted to bring me home to meet the family. Being a history buff, I asked to see the Civil War battlefield while we were there, because we didn't have anything like that in California. Nothing preserved anyway. So we went on a mini road trip, just the two of us, to Vicksburg to visit the battlefield there. A lot of it had been taken back by forest, and there's a road that goes through the woods so you can get to each part of the battlefield. It was a weekday, so we were basically the only people around. As we were driving, we took a turn, and that's when stuff got weird. I noticed that the sounds of the forest were suddenly gone. No sounds of trees in the winds, no birds. It was eerily quiet, like someone had a volume remote and hit mute. Also, if you hadn't picked up on this yet, it was the middle of the day. I didn't know if my husband was experiencing the same thing, and since we were fairly new into our relationship, I didn't want to scare him off with any talks of paranormal stuff. I kept my eyes out on the window, and he slowed the car to a stop without saying anything. All of a sudden, over the radio, I start hearing men's voices in my ears. I still wasn't looking over, and was sort of frozen. My husband slowly turned down and then off the radio. It was apparent now that he had heard them too. Then he turned off the car, and the voices got even louder, as if we were standing in the middle of a group of men, and they could see us, but we couldn't see them. I can't remember exactly what they were saying, but we both said afterwards we had the heaviest feeling that they were talking about us, and they seemed as surprised to see us as we were to see them. As if I flipped a switch. I have no idea how long we were sitting there for, but then all of a sudden the whispers were gone. The sounds of nature returned at full volume, with birds chirping, trees, and even some deer crossed in front of the car, as if they sensed the coast was clear. That's when another car pulled up behind us. My husband quickly turned the car back on and we moved on. We were both flabbergasted. We had our first paranormal discussion as a couple. What's odd is both of us had previously in our lives been heavily into the paranormal, him leaning towards the very religious aspect of it. At the time this happened, he had left the church and was a non-believer in anything beyond. I was a huge skeptic and had actually been grieving the loss of my faith in the idea that something else was out there. It was an experience that rocked both of us, and neither of us had any idea of the other's beliefs when it came to this stuff. So what do you all think? Did we hit a sort of time slip and confuse the hell out of some Civil War soldiers? Or was it just a residual haunting that we happened upon? January 12th, 2019. It's 8 p.m, and I'm gonna be honest, I chose to go out on this particular night because my town was having a little ghost tour at the haunted hospital. I was lonely and wanted to at least see the others having fun. It was 8 p.m. when I left the house and planned to be back within an hour. I was having a routine of circling my town in the evening because I just liked patrolling, and there's always something creepy after nightfall. I made my visit to the haunted hospital, and once I got there I saw flashlights inside the windows and heard laughter. That's nice, I thought. Seeing others have fun made me smile, and got rid of some of the loneliest feelings I was having. This was the halfway point of my walk, and I started my second half heading home. There were some woods on the opposite side of town now, but nothing impressive until I got to the last quarter of my walk. Now I was passing the baseball fields on my left, with large wheat fields on my right. This wheat field used to be a large extension of the woods, but was cleared out for growing wheat. I continued again, and crossed the small bridge that went over a creek and passed another section of woods. I was now heading towards an old metal building that has recently been turned into a place for making gates and fences. It was around 9 p.m. now. This building had two small white houses inside it, and a stretch of dirt road wrapping around the back side of it before returning to a normal asphalt road. Now at night, this place seems pretty scary. But this was one of my favorite places to hang out at night, and is a normal path I take my walks through. As I was coming up to the dirt road, I saw a very tall 8 to 10 foot pale figure, with lanky arms, almost dragging the ground, about 40 feet ahead of me, briskly walk from the white house to the woods. I stopped walking. What was that? I thought. Its size confused me so much that I had forgotten my previous encounter with a smaller version of it. After a few minutes of standing there, I convinced myself to continue walking forwards. I mean, I was an adventurous person, and there's no way I was just going to turn around and go home when I saw something so odd and out of place. Not even 15 seconds into walking forwards, this sudden heavy sense of dread overcame me, like a giant weight crashing down on my shoulders. My instincts were telling me something was really wrong. I turned my iPhone light on and shined it at the woods. Nothing. I kept walking while keeping my head on a swivel, looking in all directions to keep my surroundings in check. About the 5th or 6th time, I looked at the woods, and I saw it. A huge, bleached, white humanoid figure, crouched on all fours. It was easily still 5 to 6 feet tall, even though it was bent over. Its black eyes paralyzed me. It had a big, round, bald head, and an extremely emaciated body, void of all hair, with very long, almost dislocated-looking arms and legs. Its legs were like a flamingo bird's at the knee, as it bent backwards instead of forwards. I took all of this in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, it reminded me of a praying mantis when it swayed back and forth while staring at me, if deciding whether to attack me or not. This broke me out of my trance as I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I had run a block. Out of breath and scared as hell, I finally took a glance back. I didn't see anything in sight. I didn't hear it chase me either. Maybe it was just stalking those people in those two little white houses and waiting for me to go away. Maybe it didn't want anything to do with me. But that wasn't the end. I got home, took a shower, and turned on the lights before I hopped into bed, when suddenly there was something tapping at my window. 3 taps and nothing else. I laid in my bed that night, wondering whether it had followed me home or not. A string of bad luck ensued afterwards the following weeks. I was constantly burning stuff on the stove that was relatively easy to make, and I was an excellent cook. My dog started going nuts at night, growling and barking in the living room and at the front door, which she had never done before. And finally, I got deathly sick for 3 weeks straight, with no sure sign of what I had gotten. 103 fever, vomiting with blood, diarrhea with blood, sneezing, coughing, sore throats, migraines, nerve spasms, a stuffy and dry nose, severe stomach aches, and aches everywhere, especially in my bones. I've had smaller strings of bad luck before, after hearing its mimicking cry, trying to lure me into the woods, but it has never been this extreme. And now, I don't go into the woods anymore. I live in Illinois. The first event happened in late August of 2016, while we were running late one night. We both ran cross country and track in high school, and still do so to this day. My friend worked a job that wouldn't get out sometimes until 10 or 11 at night, so we would typically go running very late. This had been happening for a few years at this point, so we knew our paths very well. On the local running path, down 2.5 blocks into the woods that butts up against a large creek. At some points on the path in the woods, you can see houses and a park, but other times it starts to get a bit more secluded, and we aren't talking like the wilderness here though. There is wildlife in the area, mostly raccoons and skunks and random beavers and the occasional deer. Over the years we have seen more and more coyotes around the streets, but never in the woods. Given to our location, there isn't a local bear or wolf population, and this is a critical detail to the story. We meet to go running one night at around 11:15. I'm not entirely sure of the exact time, but it was fairly late, and the thunderstorms were on the way according to the weather app. For this reason, both of us left our phones in the car. The one time we have, and we've regretted it ever since, and decided to run pretty fast to make it back before the storm. In the woods, it is mostly a wood chip trail until you get to 200 meters from our turnaround spot, a water pumping station, as the town has had flood problems recently, where it turns to asphalt. We run to the turnaround spot and start running back, as this was about 1/4 of a mile from the wood chips to turn around and back. I would estimate it took around 2 to 3 minutes, given a slight stop at our turnaround. On our way back, we noticed what can only be described to this day as an upside-down trash can with a fuzzy blurred outline in the middle of the path, right before its transition into wood chips. If I had to guess, I would say it were around 3 to 4 feet tall, perhaps on the shorter side, and I again need to stress that this was only 2 to 3 minutes after we had our first run by and come back to that exact spot. This thing had appeared there in that short period. We stopped running as this was rather peculiar and not there when we ran by the first time, but we continued walking closer. We thought maybe someone moved something in front of us as a prank, as the only people that frequented the woods other than us at the time were teenagers smoking or drinking, but they are loud and can be heard from very far away. This thing was dead silent, and we had continued to get closer until we were around 50-ish feet away, and it started to move. When I say move, it was standing still, but as if it was swaying part of its body completely left and then completely right. We had seen a red glare on either side when it turned its head, like the lit end of a cigarette when someone inhales. Not a very bright glow, but enough to be seen in the pitch black, as there are no lights in the area. Talking between us, we begin to become very uneased, as this was unlike any person/animal behavior we had ever seen. This thing made no sound, and we were worried it was some dangerous animal. So we started backing up slowly and made a run for it. It did not follow us, but stayed in place, moving in the same manner. We ran as fast as we could back to my car and drove over, arriving approximately 25 to 30 minutes later, as the storm had started to come in. Looking around, we found no trace of it whatsoever. No broken branches in the woods, no footprints, nothing that would lead you to believe a large creature in the woods visited us. Neither of us could explain it, and after failing to find an observation, we tucked it away. Fast forward to the end of December of that year. We were on another run, one of our first at night since the incident. And when we got to the pumping station, we had found a disturbing sight. We discovered what appeared to be a dead deer leg lodged in the chain link fence, pretty much completely picked clean, with the exception of some skin and hair at the hooves at the bottom. The whole thing was pretty intact from thigh to hoof. Shortly after, I decided to bring a different friend to these woods who had the ability to see spirits, to see if he could discover anything. As we walked by the spot, we saw the trash can. He was startled and focused towards the woods. I asked him what he saw, and without me telling him any other information prior to our arrival, besides having some sort of experience here, he described it as a cloaked figure around the same height as what I saw, with beady red eyes staring at us. He said once it noticed that he could see it, it ran quickly into the woods. In the weeks afterwards, my running friend was back out on the trail, only to discover other bones that we believed to be missing parts to the dead deer. He first discovered a spinal column with rib ends just laying in the grass next to the pavement and woods. He carefully moved it to be with the other deer leg to keep track of them all in one place. 3 days later, in the same exact spot, he discovered what appeared to be a neck vertebrae, and then a few days after, in the exact same spot, another bone, one which we do not know which part of the body it came from. At first, we were thinking wild animals when we experienced this creature, but these other occurrences led us to believe something paranormal was afoot in these woods. Does anyone have any explanation for what may be happening here? I can't find answers, and I am desperate for any information whatsoever. There's a valley in the northern part of Norway, with some quite unexplainable sightings and encounters. Some Norwegians might know the valley that I'm talking about, as some Finnish and Swedish hikers were taken by an avalanche in this area a few weeks ago, and it was all over the news. However, this valley is not only home to countless casualties by avalanches, but also, as I said, unexplainable sightings. Several people, including my uncle and aunt, have reported seeing strange and scary things while either being in the forest or the single dirt road that goes through the valley. Here are some true stories about people who've experienced the unexplainable. Number 1. The Hunter. There's a moose hunter living in the closest village to the valley, who's apparently experienced some quite chilling stuff. So chilling, in fact, that he has never told anyone about what he's seen. There are two encounters that stick out. As I said, this man is a moose hunter, which is a quite popular thing in Norway, with organised hunter teams and a yearly period between October and December when these hunters are allowed to hunt. Norway has one of the highest moose concentrations in the world, so it's not surprising how many hunt for them. However, what this hunter saw was probably not a moose. You see, around a decade ago he was on post in one of the forests of the valley, waiting for moose. Then suddenly he saw something that scared him to death. He had his gun ready, but apparently it was so scary he didn't dare shoot it. As I said, he's never really told anyone what he's seen. The only thing he did was leave every single one of his belongings, like his provisions, gun, and backpack, and ran straight out of the valley to civilization. Scary, right? Or is it a lie? We don't know, but this next story will surely convince you it's not. The same hunter, for some reason, chose to camp in that valley sometime later. I don't know for sure what happened outside his tent while he was sleeping, because he never tells what he experienced, but something in that valley made him leave all his belongings again and run straight out the valley. However, this time he didn't dare go back for his tent, and someone else had to go fetch them for him. Clearly, something very chilling must have gone down in that valley for a seasoned hunter to never return. The next incident is the car that never gets closer. This has happened to several people, but I'm going to tell it from my aunt and uncle's point of view, as they have experienced it as well. So there's a dirt road going through the valley. My uncle and aunt drove their car on this road one night. Now, this valley is a pretty desolate place. By Norwegian standards, it's just 1 hour from the largest city in northern Norway, so they didn't expect to see any other drivers on that stretch, especially because the road was in bad condition. But as you probably would imagine by now, they saw the headlights of a car in the distance. My uncle and aunt didn't care much for it and continued driving, but making space for the other car, so when it gets close, it could drive past them. But the car didn't seem to get any closer. The headlights were still visible, and it wasn't driving away from them either. So my uncle and aunt started to wonder what it could be. They kept on driving for several minutes, thinking it was a car that had broken down, and the people needed help getting home. Or maybe it was the ghost car that other people had encountered on the road, known as the car that never gets any closer. And they never got any closer to the car. Now keep in mind, they saw the headlights, not the rear lights. Eventually the lights disappear, and they never saw the car again. The third story is the ghost by the river. A friend of my aunt had experienced some pretty scary stuff, and seems to attract paranormal entities. One encounter was close to this valley. She was walking by a narrow road with her sister, approaching a small bridge. When she got close, she could feel a force pushing her, and when she stepped on the bridge, she got pushed hard and almost fell over into the river below. I don't remember the rest of the story, but I'm pretty sure she was quite frightened after the incident. Point being, this valley and surrounding area is likely very haunted, with things that would rather not be disturbed. I've always been one to go out exploring abandoned buildings or areas that are haunted. I've always been a skeptic, even though most of my friends have had what they believe to be a paranormal experience, simply because I've never experienced anything myself. So me and my friend Trevor were going out to whatever was apparently the most haunted road in western New York. Although both of us have been to the road before, just not with each other. Trevor said he'd heard some crazy stuff on the road where he went, But I, on the other hand, had not. Trevor's had plenty of whack ghost happenings all through his life, and he believes there's a spirit attached to him, or something along those lines. But let me tell you about this road. I don't know too much about it. This is just what my friends have told me and what I've read online. It's very old and long. No streetlights, tons of trees following the road, and some creepy hidden paths in the woods. Apparently, people have seen a little girl, some horse-dog type thing, and an old man walking around with a lantern. There's also supposedly an old church somewhere in the woods that was burnt down. Anyway, we were driving up and down the road to make sure there were no serial killers or monsters. I was paranoid, okay? I might not be a big believer, but I get the creeps too. When this car all of a sudden drives by us. Thing is, just before we passed them, a black figure darts behind their car and just vanishes into the darkness. I couldn't believe my eyes. I hit the brakes as an immediate reaction, thinking I was about to hit a deer or something. But again, there was nothing to hit. It literally disappeared in front of us. Trevor saw it, I saw it, and the car next to us slammed on their brakes too and screamed, "What the hell was that?" So I'm sure as hell that they're assuming they saw something in their mirrors. I tried rationalizing, and we continued driving down the road and decided to park and turn off the car and lights. We were trying to get an EVP, so we needed silence, and didn't want to kill my car battery, so we brought our flashlights. Nothing came up, so we just started walking down the road, listening and looking around for any sign of paranormal activity. We get to about 10 feet away from my car when my freaking car doors just locked. Clear as day, you could hear it click. All 4 doors. Of course, Trevor heard it too, and we ran back to the car, and sure enough, every door was locked. I didn't touch my car keys. They were wrapped around my neck with a lanyard. Nothing was near my neck, and nothing bumped the buttons or anything. We both hopped in and skirted off. Finally, as we get towards the middle of the road, we calm down and pull over again, just so that I didn't have a panic attack, because what? We're sitting there in my car. I'm looking down the road, and he's looking next to us, flashing his light, being all sketched out. I guess his flashlight kept flickering on and off, but that can easily be explained by old batteries, probably. I kid you not. I saw what looked like a lantern. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I saw something. Just as the light goes off into the woods, I turned to Trevor to see if he saw it too. And just before anything comes out of his mouth, we both hear what sounded like someone walking in the woods right next to us. I turned my car back on, and off we went, away from that damn road. Once I grow some more balls, we're bringing more people, and we're going back to Delaware Road. We might even go down the trails and look for the church, or what's left of it. I live in Hobart, Tasmania, which is a city surrounded by forest, which Australians call the bush. It doesn't take long if you walk in any direction to find yourself in the bush. One afternoon in 1987, I decided to go for a walk on a nearby reserve, known as Knocklofty, which comprises of a series of hills behind North Hobart. As I walked along, I looked up and saw a man standing right in the middle of the walking track. He had long hair and a beard and seemed a bit grubby. I could tell that there was something weird about him from the fact that he stood in the middle of the track and waited as I walked towards him. He started staring straight into my eyes, otherwise doing nothing. His presence worried me, so as I passed I looked away from him because he had not taken his eyes off me, and I was fairly scared, there being no one else on the track that day that I'd seen as I had walked by, and, foolishly, I'd not left a note at home for my friends stating that I was out in the bush. So if this guy had been a killer or something, he would have had no problems getting away with it and making me disappear without a trace. As I passed right by him, I felt a palpable madness growing in him, and I kept my head down, worrying that he was now following me. Then I waited until I was sure he was a fair way behind me, before turning back and see if he was indeed following me. Instead, what I saw amazed me so much I stopped dead in my tracks and watched him for a little while. He smiled straight at me, and I think I must have unknowingly grinned a little back at him in amazement. What he was now doing was still standing in the exact same place where I just walked past him, except he was now beaming with an insanely proud smile and staring into my eyes with wild exhilaration at what he'd somehow managed to do, because all over his outstretched arms, shoulders and head were hopping dozens and dozens of tiny and wild native birds, seemingly attracted to this person, as though by some weird magnetic force, something that I cannot explain to this day, and which I have only seen as something fitting into the realms of the paranormal for its inexplicably strange nature. I could not believe what I was seeing, and afterwards what I had seen, but I also did not feel safe to approach him, so I turned around and went home, impressed by what I'd witnessed and very excited about sharing this story with friends. Unfortunately, the first person to get home completely refused to believe my story, so I gave up bothering trying to tell anyone else about it that day. However, 10 years later or so I mentioned it to him, and he exclaimed, "Oh yeah, I know some other people who saw him, and they say it happened to them as well," which really vindicated me. I don't know whether or not it was actually my story that I told him years ago that he recalled, as he smoked a lot of the green, but I felt good to know that I'd finally managed to at least get one friend to believe the strange Birdman of Knocklofty Terrace. I haven't been up there for years, and sometimes wonder if he still hangs around up there, waiting to freak out unsuspecting passers-by, or if he just manifests out of the ether as some type of master magician to call his bird friends. But one thing I am certain of is that on that day there really was nothing you could call normal about the encounter at all. Picture this: a person, just a regular person, in regular everyday clothes, but semi-blurry. All clothing is completely solid, the same color blue from top to bottom. The flesh is almost a pinkish color, with literally zero facial features. The first time I can recall seeing them was when living in an extremely haunted house in Eastern Connecticut. It was extremely tainted land. There was a small pond my cousins and I would go fish at. It was actually two ponds right next to each other, one slightly lower than the other. On this particular day, my cousin was between the two ponds, and I was on the opposite side of the lower one, but you could still see everything at the upper pond. I started noticing two figures come from the other side of the pond he was at, walking across the water, side by side, like it wasn't even there. I was stunned for a solid minute until I started flagging him down to turn around. I don't know why I couldn't yell, but I just kept waving at him to spin around, but he was looking at me like I was crazy. It was like out of a bad movie. I threw my pole down and started running around the water to get to him as fast as I could. I think when these things realized I saw them, they booked it the other way, back from whence they came. I could see them go into the woods on the other side from where they came from. He, obviously, didn't believe me. I would say, okay, I'm just crazy. But I remember another time fishing there by myself. I found some dead puppies floating in the water in a plastic bag, which isn't really supernatural in a way, but I also began hearing Indian drums playing in the woods, like real Native American drumming, and it was getting closer to me. I dropped my gear and ran like hell, and didn't go back for 2 days. I was probably 10 or 11. The second time I remember seeing one was in Bridgeport, Connecticut of all places. There was another small pond, literally just above paddle rating, in a really small area of the woods where we built a fort. I cut through the woods with friends and we crossed Park Avenue to where St. Margaret's Shrine is. I turned around for some reason and saw another figure, all blue clothing, no features, but oddly jet black with crazy looking hair, just kind of lumbering in the area we were in. I watched it and asked my buddies to look, but they didn't see anything. The last time I remember seeing one was up in Oxford with my cousins in the woods. It was known for some people doing worship there. It was me, some cousins and the dog. We split up and I was at a river in the woods. Something made me decide I wanted to climb the rock up the very steep hillside, like a cliff with the river below it. When you're 12, this thing looks huge. When I made it to the top, their dog was there and they were gone. I got this weird feeling like I was being watched, and the dog started getting jittery and barking when I turned around, and then there was another one. It turned and took off again. I guess they don't like being noticed. I would have said again, I'm crazy and seeing things, but the dog took off after it. I ran after the dog until she came back, and we both left the woods. Anyone who knows Oxford knows it can have some deep woods, so this was a trek back, but the dog wasn't agitated anymore, so I figured whatever it was gone. I sort of figured they weren't aggressive either, since the dog wasn't worried anymore. But I swear, the first time with my cousin fishing at the ponds, they were creeping up behind him to do something nefarious. But maybe I was wrong and they were just curious. It sounds unbelievable. Even I have never truly come across any conclusion, nor 100% believe my own eyes nor memory. But they have never had any kind of explanation, nor have I ever seen them again, and I've tried. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Well done for making it to the end. I always enjoy our journeys into the woods. If you did like the video, don't forget to do all the great things like, comment, subscribe, bell, if you haven't already, to help the channel out. It really does help. As I said at the start, my brother has launched this really fascinating and interesting video over on his channel Forgotten Lives. The link will be shown on screen shortly and is still in the description, and I do recommend you check it out. It is really, really good. A huge thank you as always to all my patrons. You guys mean the world to me, and thank you for helping me keep the channel going. If you are interested in becoming a patron, having your name on screen and receiving a ton of benefits as well, just check out the link in the description. It means a lot too. And with that being said, the link is now on screen, so feel free to click it and I'll stop talking and check out that amazing video. But for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.